discusses the results from the MONALEESA 7 trial, which explored CDK4/6 inhibitors in premenopausal women with advanced cancer. And I'm happy to introduce Dr. Sarah Hurvitz, Director of the Breast Cancer Clinical Research Program at UCLA Johnson Comprehensive Cancer Center, to discuss the abstract.
Good morning. On behalf of my co-investigators, I'd like to thank ASCO for inviting us to present our results here at this press briefing this morning. By way of background, let's look at the scope of breast cancer. How big is this problem? In 2019, over 268,000 women will be diagnosed with breast cancer, and approximately 20% of these diagnoses will be in women under the age of 50. Breast cancer is the leading cause of cancer deaths in women under the age of 45 years, and at least 2/3 of breast cancer are hormone receptor positive, so they're fueled by or driven by the female hormone estrogen. Compared with older women, younger women with breast cancer tend to have poorer prognoses and more aggressive behaving disease biology, even when it's hormone receptor positive. Yet premenopausal patients are underrepresented in clinical trials. Ribociclib is a CDK4/6 inhibitor which is approved for advanced HER2 negative hormone receptor positive breast cancer. It's approved as initial therapy in combination with an aromatase inhibitor in pre, peri, and postmenopausal patients based on the results of a group of studies called the MONALEESA trials. These studies showed a significant improvement in progression-free survival, such that women treated in this first-line setting have a median progression-free survival of roughly 2 years, which is 10 to 12 months longer than patients treated with endocrine therapy alone. So these drugs are extending the length of time women can live without their disease progressing. It's also approved in combination with fulvestrant in postmenopausal women with advanced hormone receptor positive breast cancer as initial endocrine therapy or after disease progression. We are today going to be presenting overall survival results from one of these MONALEESA trials, the MONALEESA 7. And it's important to note that it's very difficult in metastatic breast cancer studies to demonstrate a significant improvement in overall survival because patients have the opportunity to receive subsequent treatments after coming off trial, many times multiple lines of therapy, and can even in the situation where a therapy is FDA approved, such as ribociclib, cross over to receive therapy after coming off trial. MONALEESA 7 is the first study to evaluate a CDK4/6 inhibitor exclusively in younger premenopausal women. This is the design of the MONALEESA 7 study. It's designed for pre- and perimenopausal women under the age of 59 years with hormone receptor positive advanced breast cancer. They were not allowed to have received prior endocrine therapy for advanced disease, but they could have received up to 1 prior line of chemotherapy for metastatic disease, though only a minority of those patients did so, fewer than 15%. 672 women were randomly assigned 50-50 to receive ribociclib with this dosing, 3 weeks on, 1 week off, plus a non-steroidal aromatase inhibitor or tamoxifen. The patients and physicians got to choose which the patient would go on. And then all patients received gaserelin to turn off their ovaries' production of estrogen. The other arm was placebo with this endocrine therapy. Now, we published in 2018 in Lancet Oncology the primary endpoint of progression-free survival and demonstrated that women in the ribociclib arm had a median PFS of 23.8 months, which was 10 months better than patients in the placebo arm. What we are presenting today is the key secondary endpoint of overall survival. These are the overall survival data shown here. With a median duration of follow-up at this interim analysis of almost 35 months, which was an additional 15 months from the primary analysis, there were 35 patients on the ribociclib arm who are still receiving study treatment at the time of data cutoff. And we demonstrated an approximate 29% relative reduction in the risk of death with this treatment, ribociclib. I like to look here at this landmark analysis at the bottom, and what we did is we took a look at 42 months here to see the percentage of patients alive at 42 months in each of the arm. In this placebo arm, 46% of patients were alive at 42 months, and that compares to 70.2% of patients in the ribociclib arm. Now, as I mentioned at the study design slide, patients had a choice between receiving an aromatase inhibitor or tamoxifen. The vast majority of patients, 495, actually received an aromatase inhibitor. So let's focus on the curve on the left. And what you can see is that the hazard ratio and the landmark analysis and the median overall survival were all similar to what I just showed you for the overall population. On the right is the smaller subgroup who received tamoxifen, and I would just like to point out here that this is a smaller subgroup. We actually do not give tamoxifen with ribociclib. Subsequent to this study closing, it was determined that tamoxifen is associated with a prolongation of the QT interval, so it could put patients at risk for arrhythmia. So it is not approved in combination with tamoxifen. So in conclusion, ribociclib plus endocrine therapy resulted in a statistically significant longer overall survival compared with endocrine therapy alone. As of the data cutoff, 35% of patients in the ribociclib arm were still receiving treatment, which was higher than the patients in placebo. Patients who received an aromatase inhibitor demonstrated a similar overall survival benefit compared to the overall population, and the safety remained consistent with the known tolerability profile, which we published again in 2018. This is the first time a statistically significant improvement in overall survival has been observed with the CDK4/6 inhibitor in combination with endocrine therapy in patients with hormone receptor positive advanced disease. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Hurwitz. So I'd like to turn to Dr. Hal Burstein for a few additional remarks.
Well, it's really exciting to be here this morning because the golden age of clinical research in oncology continues. And a theme we see in this presentation, and I think the one to follow in lung cancer, is that with mature and robust data, we are now seeing substantial improvements in survival with the innovative drugs that are coming to our market. This is an important study because it shows that a class of drugs, CDK4/6 inhibitors, which we are widely using and have been shown to delay the time to treatment progression, delay the time to the need for chemotherapy for advanced breast cancer, and really double the effectiveness of endocrine therapy, now also translates into a significant survival benefit for women who have ER-positive metastatic breast cancer. It's also significant because, as Dr. Hurwitz mentioned, this study focuses on a group of young women. And young women, while many people think of them as having different kinds of breast cancer, like triple-negative breast cancer or HER2-positive breast cancer, in fact, the most common form of breast cancer in young women is estrogen receptor-positive breast cancer. And this is the largest study in recent memory that has focused exclusively on premenopausal women and shows that they, too, benefit from this class of drugs in a remarkable way. And finally, in an era when we are thinking about value in oncology care, the demonstration of a robust survival difference, I think, substantially adds to a value proposition for products like ribociclib that were discussed here. And so hopefully these data will enable access to this product to more women around the world, particularly in healthcare systems which assess value rigorously as part of their decisions for national access to drugs. So important survival data in a group of patients historically understudied, now shown to have a benefit, and clearly establish the value of this class of drugs in the management of the most common form of breast cancer.
Hal, if I could just ask you one follow-up question. So as you mentioned, this is a class of drugs. There are several other CDK4/6 inhibitors that are approved for treatment of breast cancer. Could you just comment as to, are the other drugs also used in premenopausal women, and have the other drugs reported out any survival data?
So there are 3 commercially available products, ribociclib, palbociclib, and abemaciclib, marketed in the U.S. They've all been approved, as Dr. Hurvitz said, for very similar trials, principally looking at postmenopausal women. This trial was the only study that exclusively looked at premenopausal women. There have been some premenopausal women included in subsets of the other trials, and an FDA analysis done last year showed that very similar trends in terms of progression-free survival for younger or older women. And I think that one of the myths that this study helps suppress is the idea that young women with ER-positive breast cancer have a fundamentally different outcome than older women. Actually, their outcomes look very similar. As Sarah mentioned, this is the first study that has shown a statistically significant survival benefit. Maturation of other studies continues. There was a report last fall for a different product, palbociclib, that was in postmenopausal women. Again, a longer follow-up. The curves began to separate, but the p-value was 0.08, so it was not quite statistically significant. I think that in the breast cancer community, these data on top of that earlier finding are really making people think that as a class of drugs, there's a real survival signal here, and we have embraced and will continue to embrace the class of drugs for that reason.
Are there any significant differences in side effect profile among the 3 commercially available drugs?
By oncology standards, these are all very well-tolerated drugs. They are oral medicines. They are portable. Patients can take them in their communities, and they can travel with them, and it's a relatively easy medicine. They do cause occasional problems with low white blood counts or lower GI symptoms like diarrhea, and the different products have very subtle differences in their overall tolerability, but again, for the most part, they're considered quite well-tolerated products.
Great, thanks. Well, we'll give all of you a chance to ask your questions in a few minutes, but I just wanted to bring out those points. Our next presentation discusses the 5-year survival data from the key